Good morning, Drew! So are you gonna pre-order our dev kit of Apple Vision Pro?
No, I actually had some questions about iPadOS 17 here. Is it true that you guys are gonna be supporting external webcams? Like
Oh my god, Drew! Don't you realize how close your eyes are to the display? You need to be careful!
How close my eyes? What? No, I was just looking at this one little list here on the compatibility chart.
You need to protect your eyes, Drew. Your eyes can be easily damaged by keeping displays that close to your face.
Aren't those displays a little close to your face?
It's not the same thing, Drew. These are micro OLED panels. They're the size of a postage stamp. It's totally okay for them to be this close to your vision.
Right, okay, well then I'll hold this from further away to be more safe. iPhone 10 isn't getting iOS 17?
Oh, geez, you know what? I have to get going. Vision OS launch and all that. It's gonna be quite busy.
How cool is that?
Now that we've got all the talk about Apple Vision Pro on my last video out of the way, I just want to talk about the rest of WWDC, and not the one more thing moment, which was 45 minutes. Primarily talking about how we got hardware. First thing out the gate, they didn't want to talk about software. Yes, the 15-inch MacBook Air is real, and yes, the price was actually way more reasonable than I originally thought. $1,300 for a 15-inch MacBook with an 18-hour battery life. Yeah, the specs there seem decent, right? And yes, it was way cheaper than I thought it was going to be, which I gotta give Apple a round of applause. That's fantastic. Where a bit more of the criticisms come in, though, is with the complexity of the MacBook lineup. So for one, I'm grateful that they reduced the price of the 13-inch MacBook Air with the M2 chip, so $100 knocked off of that. That's great. But they're still selling the M1 MacBook Air. After nearly 3 years of this being on the market, they don't want to take it away. I mean, it's a great laptop, don't get me wrong. I'd recommend lots of people buy it. It's just, I wouldn't tell you to buy it new. When it's been around for this long, you can get it refurbished and secondhand. I'll leave a link in the description where you can get a really reasonably priced M1 MacBook Air. But yeah, now we've got 3 variants of the MacBook Air and 3 variants of the MacBook Pro, and the 13-inch MacBook Pro doesn't even belong in the Pro category to me. It's this weird middle ground thing. But a lot of you were asking if I recommend the 15-inch MacBook Air with the M2 chip now because of the lower price, and truthfully, I can justify it as long as you're getting the entry-level model. It is a very reasonable price for what you're getting, I think, but the important thing to be aware of, especially if you're starting to spec it up, like, yeah, I want a 15-inch MacBook Air, but you know, I also want 512 gigs of storage or more, or maybe I want 16 gigs of RAM and like that. Well, very quickly in that case, it turns into an $1,800 purchase, and just as a reminder, again, links in the description, you can find a 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is going to have twice the refresh rate, twice the storage, twice the RAM as the entry-level 15-inch MacBook Air, and it's 14 inches. It's just 1 inch in screen size. You'll get thinner bezels on the Pro, you'll get better speakers, better microphone, better I/O on the Pro, and yeah, it's a little bit thicker, but honestly, I think the larger overall footprint of the 15-inch Air is going to impede on its portability a lot more than the overall weight. I don't think most of you guys really notice a huge difference in weight, but the 15-inch Air is going to be wider and longer, so fitting it into a bag isn't going to work as well, honestly, than the 14-inch MacBook Pro will, and that's mini LED, you know? You got your ProMotion, you got your XDR, and you can find those for like $1,400, so just a little bit more than the base model 15-inch Air, which is why I'd say for most people, yeah, I'm still going to recommend you buy the 14-inch MacBook Pro, particularly the one from 2021. It's just such an incredible value for all of the specs you get, and it's a decent screen size in my opinion. So unless $1,400 is just too far a stretch and you really want the shiny brand new flashy thing, then I guess, yeah, for $1,300 the 15-inch MacBook Air is a pretty decent bargain, so well done Apple on pricing that one. And then we got the standard run-of-the-mill M2 spec boost for the Mac Studio, M2 Max, that makes sense, and then the introduction of the M2 Ultra. Yes, this is technically Apple's fastest silicon of all time, but honestly probably not that much faster than the M1 Ultra in the first place. We've seen how the 5nm architecture scales in the past, and I think on these higher-end pro-level Macs, especially on the desktops, Apple is kind of phoning it in. They're kind of being a little lazy on this one, like, yeah, let's just stitch 2 Max chips together again and call it a Pro chip. They did update the HDMI port on the Mac Mac Studio, which is good though, because they updated the MacBook Pros with the new HDMI 2.1 anyway, so the Mac Studio was just kind of sitting around awkwardly. And there was a lot of speculation for a while on whether or not Apple would actually refresh the Mac Studio or just replace it with the Mac Pro. Turns out they're just gonna have both. So M2 Ultra is in the Mac Studio. Same starting price, by the way. $2,000 for M2 Max, $4,000 for M2 Ultra, but then coming in at $7,000, kind of a price hike, but it's technically cheaper overall. The Mac Pro has now officially switched to Apple Silicon. It took them freaking 3 years to do it, and they were about a year late on this whole complete with the Intel transition thing. But yes, finally the Intel Mac Pro is gone. All the Intel Macs have been removed from the website, thankfully. As nice as it is to kind of check that box, Apple kind of went pretty lazy with the new Mac Pro. Basically the exact same chip as the Mac Studio, M2 Ultra only, but it still starts with the binned model, and then a non-binned model costs a little bit more. But the design is practically identical. They really changed nothing as far as I can tell, other than the video card on the back supports 8 Thunderbolt ports now. But what kills me, I've never liked this cheese grater Mac Pro. Even back in 2019, you can go back and watch my videos, I was not a fan of this Mac being as expensive as it was, especially with the storage options they were shipping it with. Thankfully, it ships with a terabyte now by default. But not only did they just want to slap in an M2 Ultra and call it a day, they also didn't even bring the SD card slot to the Mac Pro. Yes, even if you spend $7,000, $10,000, or $12,000 on this machine, you still have to buy an additional accessory to get an SD card to plug into it, which is all the more reason I can tell you, please just buy the Mac Studio. The modularity of the Mac Pro is not that great. So if you're wondering to yourself, wait, what's the difference between the Mac Studio versus the Mac Pro if they both have M2 Ultra in it? One is just way bigger than the other? Well, yeah, the Mac Pro is basically, I think, a chassis in a design optimized for Intel in modularity, but now it's just got an ARM chip slapped inside of it. So there's PCIe slots, but they can't really do anything that most of you would be interested in. You can't upgrade the RAM because it's a system-on-chip architecture, and you can't upgrade the GPU. You can't put in some higher-end graphics cards or even Apple Afterburner cards into this thing because of the same reason as number one. It's a system-on-chip design. So yes, it's gonna have great graphic performance and it's much faster than the Intel-based Mac Pro, but the RAM technically maxes out now at around 200 gigs, whereas before you could go all the way up to 1.5 terabytes, but honestly, I doubt very many people were doing that. But yeah, there's not some crazy configurator with like 18 different CPU options and 18 different RAM options. Now it's cleaned up a lot, and something I really appreciate about it is before, you know, you could spec out a Mac Pro to be well over $50,000, and it was like, what was Apple thinking? How many people are actually buying that? Is it worth their time at manufacturing it and engineering it? Whereas now, even if you max out the Mac Pro, you're still capping out under $13,000, which, yeah, that's still technically a lot, but it's far, far, far more reasonable than the $30,000 to $50,000 Mac Pros that Apple was charging for just a few days ago. So it's nice to have that crazy expensive Mac Pro finally wiped off the face of Apple's website. And yes, this new one isn't that great because those PCIe slots are basically just good for extra storage. Apple sells little modules if you want to add more storage, and you can put networking cards in there, or audio cards or video cards, which are going to be more custom for the businesses that are buying this machine. But honestly, I feel like most people that need more than 8 terabytes are going to be relying on a NAS, a server anyway, and the Mac Studio can access those servers through the default 10 gigabit Ethernet, and it's still got an SD card slot on the front. I know that seems like a small thing, but for a lot of photographers and videographers out there, it is huge. So this totally feels like a Tim Cook being efficient thing, where they were just like, yeah, we've already got the manufacturing lines for the Mac Pro going. I don't want to have to scrap them and rethink everything, so let's just put a chip in there. But essentially, when you open the Mac Pro now, it looks a lot more empty because an M2 Ultra is occupying the job of several other modules that used to be there. So very, very lazy on the Mac Pro front, but it's refreshing that the Intel Mac is finally done. Although I was disappointed to see we did not get any USB-C Magic Keyboard or Magic Mouse or trackpad. This would have been a good time to drop those, and they didn't. Maybe they thought it would have given away too much for the iPhone, but I don't care. I feel like that's an open secret now. We should be switching all these accessories to Type-C, but that's pretty much all the hardware we got outside of Apple Vision Pro. But again, I did a whole video on that. Let's finally talk software, right? Because that's what this whole event is supposed to be about, but the hardware is just so distracting. So iOS 17. Let's rip the band-aid off right away. They killed off support for the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8. The A11 chip, you will live on in my heart. Thank God I switched over to the SE2 already, so I'm still getting iOS 17, but personally, I felt like that was a total ripoff. Like, iOS 17 has some cool stuff going for it, like the phone call animations you get, like you can customize your own lock screen that shows up on other people's phones when they call you, but did you need the A12 chip for that? iPad? I don't really think they did. But by far my favorite feature of iOS 17 is standby mode, which basically turns your iPhone into a nightstand, assuming it's just on its side and charging, which is really nice. And they gave you lots of customization and modules and widgets that you can switch between to let your phone be more functional when you go to bed and it's just sitting there charging. Might as well do something instead of just sitting there. So that was rumored to happen, and I'm so glad it did. That's probably the coolest part of all of iOS 17 for me. They've also added interactive widgets, which we've been asking for ever since widgets existed. So thank God now you can actually interact with something without having to launch the widget itself, which is going to be really great for people with connected cars, like Craig owns a Lucid Air, apparently. I wonder if there's some kind of acquisition fishing around. Oh, wrong channel, sorry. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, interactive widgets, it's great, and they also updated a lot of messages. So with stickers now, you can just kind of lift subjects from pictures and just drop them into iMessage. They cleaned up the UI a little bit by hiding all of the options for messages behind a plus icon, so it looks much cleaner. You get an up button if you scroll too far up or down on iMessage. You could just jump up now with a single tap, which seems really clean. But no, they didn't combine all of the phone, FaceTime, and Messages apps like some people were thinking they would. And bizarrely enough, they decided to launch the Journaled app, which was rumored to happen for the iPhone, but it's very weird. You don't actually like write journal entries in the app. The app just gives you inspiration from your pictures and your music and your location, I guess. And based on that, encourages you to write in a separate journal, you know, one with paper and everything. Very weird. I thought everyone was expecting it for the iPad, but it came to the iPhone. So apparently Apple Music now playing animations look really, really nice now, which is great. So I'll go more in depth once I have iOS 17 on my iPhone, but overall it just seems like a modest update. Most people with the beta are telling me that it feels fairly stable and there's some clean animations that have been changed. But overall, I wouldn't say it was a massive update, which is why I'm disappointed that the iPhone 10 and 8 won't get it. I know a bunch of people are going to be left out, but even though you might not get iOS 17, I'll just say you are fine. Like, I don't think you're really missing out on all that much, but overall, you can just change your wallpaper to the same thing as iOS 17 is on the website, and you'll feel like you got a brand new iPhone, okay? And that brings us to iPadOS 17, which bear with me because, yeah, the expectations were low, but yeah, somehow I still got somewhat disappointed. So finally, like they should have done last year, they let you put widgets on the lock screen, but all through this really thin and narrow column on the side. I don't know why they want it to be so thin, but yeah, you now have that lock screen customization that the iPhone has had for a year. And I know we've been asking for the calculator app for a long, long time, which is why I'm excited to say they finally added the health app. Yeah, no one was really asking for this, but yeah, you got the health app on the iPad. Still not the Apple Watch app though. So while you can track your health with the iPad, you can't pair an Apple Watch to the iPad. Still no calculator app and still no optimized battery charging, which I've been asking for years. But I will give Craig a little bit of credit here because there was a feature I've been asking for literally years now, and I thought it would never happen, but they're finally enabling external camera support on the iPad, which their demo for it is letting you access the webcam from the studio display if you plug into it directly, which is, I mean, kind of cool. It was kind of embarrassing that it didn't have access to that beforehand, but now it finally does. But I'm also excited to try that with, you know, my Blackmagic camera. I could do a cam link directly to the iPad now. That was one of those classic, like, Mac features that I always appreciated about my MacBook, but the iPad didn't really support, except now I really love and appreciate continuity camera, which allows me to turn my iPhone into a webcam, which it works really well with my Mac for that, but I don't think continuity camera works on the iPad. But you can plug in a different webcam and the iPad supposedly accesses it automatically through FaceTime, but I'm hoping in settings there's a way to switch which webcam you actually want to activate. That would be really useful and helpful. But they've also updated Stage Manager to support a few different aspect ratios than before, so it's getting even more closer to almost feeling like a Mac, but of course it's not quite there, so I can't be too forgiving of it. But I will at least thank them for adding something that I've been asking for a very long time, and they're finally letting you activate multiple timers at once and track them. Should have done that years ago, but thankfully it's here now. Same thing with live activities, so the same way you have those kind of live updates on the dynamic island with the 14 Pro, they bring that just to the bottom portion of the iPad's display. I don't know how often people will access that, but I guess it's something we got there. there. And yes, all the other features like the interactive widgets and the iMessage perks have been brought over to the iPad as well. But of course, no nightstand mode. That's something we'll probably have to wait for until next year. Then the iPad will get something that the iPhone has had for a long time once again. And then there was a ton of rumors surrounding watchOS 10. There was a lot of people saying that it would be fundamentally like rebuilt from the ground up with folders and home screens and stuff. And I would say most of the rumors about this were not terribly accurate. Like pretty much there's some cool new watch faces just like every year, which are very pretty, and I can tell Apple worked very hard on them. But essentially now on your default watch face, you can just scroll up and it brings up just a wave of different widgets that give you different information so that you can have a pretty watch face that turns modular just by turning the digital crown. So it seems clean, it seems nice. They updated the activity app a little bit, added a ton more information for cycling that no one's gonna use. But overall, it seems nice, like it's the kind of update that's not really gonna be hurting anybody too much. And the grid view looked a little bit different in the demos, but still allowing you to kind of have that home screen where you can quickly grab any app as needed. So I was grateful to see that because I still appreciate my grid view. But the biggest fundamental redesign I think I can spot is the side button no longer activates multitasking. Instead, it just brings up Control Center. I guess maybe not enough people were using multitasking in the first place, but yeah, if a lot of people were using list view in the first place, then this is probably a more efficient way for you to access your quick settings and that type of thing. And the great news is everybody that got watchOS 9 is going to get watchOS 10. So fun new watch faces and UI updates for everybody who's on the latest version of watchOS all the way back to the Series 4 and of course the SE, SE2, the Ultra. Yeah, everybody's getting watchOS 10, so sweet. iPadOS did drop a few devices though, which is a bit of a bummer considering how minor of an update iPadOS 17 felt like. But I actually saved my favorite for last, which is macOS Sonoma. This actually was way better than I think it deserved to be because I had very low expectations. Like, I don't know what else they could really do with macOS, but Sonoma lets you bring widgets to your desktop, so infinitely more customizable and far more screen space than the iPad can offer, despite offering the same size screens. macOS is just better optimized for it, and they gray out when you go into different apps, so they kind of aren't as distracting, which is nice. But by far my favorite thing is all the features they've added to the video settings. So now they will mask out your face and your shoulders, and you can have these little pop-ups and you're moving in real time, and you kind of just turn into this transparent floating bubble as you're giving presentations. And they also had this really cinematic and professional looking way to show your screen or your presentation behind you, but have you in the foreground, and just add a few clicks of a button. And you can do this in FaceTime or Zoom, or you could do it in OBS. You know, whatever program accesses the camera, you can now control what the other people see by just showing your display to others. So I can't wait to try that out on my own Mac because it seems like a great way to have like B-roll going while I'm recording a video. So through macOS Sonoma, I might honestly end up starting to record a few videos through that setting. I don't know how buggy it is yet or what silicon is required of it. I assume the M1 Max can handle it, so we'll find out. But yeah, it just looked really, really helpful. And there's animations and stuff when you give a thumbs up or a heart. You get different things popping up and like balloons that come from behind you and in front of you. It just looked really clever and really immersive, and I'm so grateful that Apple has more creative software ideas than I do, because I really didn't know what else they could do, and then they go ahead and surprise me like this, and I'm like, I'm actually gonna use that. Same thing with web apps now. With Safari, you can just take a web page that you want to use pretty frequently and turn it into an app icon on your dock, and then it emulates the website and kind of makes it feel like it's an app without having to be an app, which is a great idea because there's a lot of developers that don't want to bring their apps to the Mac App Store. They just rely on the web for everything. I'm thinking of particularly like Twitter for Mac. I hate having to manage Twitter through a tab on my browser, but if I can turn that into a web app and just keep it in my dock, then I can access all of the latest Twitter features in its own dedicated window, and I don't have to rely on the increasingly more dated Twitter for Mac app, which somehow Elon doesn't know about. It's actually pretty great. No one's verified, and there's no ads, and there's no view counter or anything. It's just a very skimmed down, simple version of Twitter, and I like it, but I can tell as more time goes on, the more things they change about Twitter, it's probably going to stop working and stop loading and stop refreshing. There's already some bugs I'm picking up on, so I'm planning my escape, and probably a web app from the Twitter website is the best way to manage it. So they've pretty much said all 2018 Macs and up will support Sonoma, with the one exception of the 2017 iMac Pro, which yes, I still have. So I'll definitely be putting the Sonoma beta on that machine. So thank God my iMac Pro will get another year of software support, even though it's basically just a big monitor for me. But yeah, that kind of summarizes all of my favorite stuff stuff. Of course, there's way more nitty-gritty details that I can go into as I get the betas now installed on my devices. So let me know what you guys are most excited about, what you want to check out, and what your favorite features are on the new update. What's the most underrated features that no one's talking about that more people should? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.